there comes a moment in your life when you stop chasing connection and start recognizing truth. When the noise fades, the masks fall, and you realize most people don't feel the world the way you do. And in that realization, something terrifying and something powerful is born. Because what if the reason you feel alone is not because you are broken, but because you are operating at a level most people haven't reached? You've been told your whole life that something about you is too much, too sensitive, too intense, too emotional. But what if I told you that too much is your power? To feel deeply is to live deeply. To sense what others ignore, to read energy beyond words, to walk into a room and know what's unspoken, that is not weakness. That is awareness at a level that most people will never understand. And here's the truth most people won't tell you. When you awaken to that level of awareness, your world changes. The conversations that once fulfilled you feel empty. The connections that once sustained you feel surface level. And the people you thought would walk with you can no longer meet you where you stand. So what happens? You start to feel alone. But listen carefully, because this is where most people misunderstand the journey. You are not being isolated. You are being refined. Life is not taking people away from you is revealing who truly belongs in your energy. And until you become strong enough to stand fully in your truth, without needing approval, without needing constant validation, you will continue to attract connections that drain, confuse, or diminish you. An awakened empath must learn one thing above all. Your energy is sacred. Not everyone deserves access to your heart. Not everyone is capable of understanding your depth. And not everyone is meant to walk your path. That's not rejection, that's alignment. Now here's where your power comes in. When you stop trying to be understood by everyone, when you stop shrinking your truth to fit into smaller spaces, when you stop apologizing for feeling deeply, you step into sovereignty. And sovereignty means this: you are whole, complete, and powerful whether anyone stands beside you or not. That's a different level of strength, because now your presence is not dependent on others. Your peace is not controlled by others. Your identity is not shaped by others. You become the source. And when you become the source, something extraordinary happens. You stop chasing connection and you start attracting it. Not in quantity, but in quality. Not in noise, but in truth. Because the right people, the aligned people, they don't feel overwhelmed by your depth. They recognize it. They respect it. Rise to meet it. But until that alignment happens, you must learn to stand alone without feeling lonely. Solitude is not your enemy. It is your training ground. It is where you learn discipline over your emotions. It is where you strengthen your boundaries. It is where you reconnect with your purpose. And purpose is what transforms sensitivity into power. Because an empath without direction feels everything and drowns in it. But an empath with purpose, they channel that emotional depth into impact, into leadership, into transformation. They don't just feel the world, they change it. So if you find yourself walking alone right now, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not losing your place in the world. You are discovering your true position in it. And that position requires strength. Not the loud, aggressive kind of strength, but the quiet, unshakable kind. The kind that says, I know who I am, I know what I feel, and I will not betray that truth just to belong. Because the moment you choose belonging over truth, you lose yourself. And the moment you choose truth over belonging, you find your power. So stand in it. Stand in your depth. Stand in your awareness. Stand in your sovereignty. Because you were never meant to be like everyone else. You were meant to feel more, to see more, to become more. And yes, that path may feel lonely at times, but it is also the path of greatness. Emotional depth is often misunderstood because most of the world is conditioned to operate on the surface. People are taught to manage appearances, control reactions, and prioritize logic over feeling. But emotional depth is not about losing control or being overwhelmed. It is about having access to a wider range of human experience. It is the ability to perceive subtle emotional shifts, to sense meaning beneath words, and to feel life with an intensity that turns ordinary moments into profound insights. This is not fragility, it is heightened awareness. When you possess emotional depth, you are not just reacting to what is happening, you are interpreting layers that others don't even notice. A simple conversation becomes a landscape of tone, intention, energy, and truth. You can detect when someone says they're fine but they're not. You can feel tension before it escalates. You can recognize authenticity and deception without needing proof. That level of perception requires strength, not weakness, because it demands that you process more information, more sensation, and more complexity than the average person. The challenge is that society rarely validates this ability. Instead, it labels it. You may have been called too sensitive, too emotional, or even dramatic. Those labels don't reflect a flaw in you, they reflect a limitation in others. People often criticize what they cannot understand or what they themselves have not developed. Emotional depth requires courage because it means you cannot hide from truth, not even your own. You feel your own fears, your own contradictions, your own unresolved patterns more clearly than most, and that forces you into growth whether you like it or not. There is also discipline involved in emotional depth. Without discipline, deep feeling can become overwhelming. But with awareness and control, it becomes a tool. You begin to choose how to respond instead of being driven by every emotion that arises. You learn to observe your feelings without being consumed by them. This is where emotional depth transforms into emotional intelligence, the ability to navigate not only your inner world, but also the emotional environments around you with precision and clarity. Another dimension of emotional depth is empathy, but not the passive kind. This is not about absorbing everyone else's emotions and losing yourself in the process. True emotional depth allows you to understand others without sacrificing your own center. It gives you the capacity to connect on a level that is rare, to make people feel seen and understood in a way they may have never experienced before. That is influence. That is power. Because people don't respond to surface level interaction, they respond to being deeply understood. Emotional depth also enhances your relationship with purpose. When you feel deeply, you cannot ignore what matters to you. You are pulled toward meaning, toward authenticity, toward alignment. Superficial goals lose their appeal because they do not satisfy your internal world. This pushes you to pursue something greater, something that resonates not just logically, but emotionally and spiritually. It creates a life that is not just successful on the outside, but fulfilling on the inside. At its core, emotional depth expands your capacity to experience life fully. It amplifies joy, sharpens intuition, deepens connection, and strengthens awareness. It demands responsibility because you must learn to manage what you feel. But in return, it gives you access to a level of perception and understanding that cannot be taught, it must be lived. As awareness deepens, something subtle but undeniable begins to shift in your relationships. The connections that once felt natural and fulfilling start to feel misaligned. It's not that the people around you suddenly change, it's that your perception evolves. You begin to notice patterns you once overlooked, conversations that lack substance, interactions that revolve around distraction rather than truth. What once felt like belonging starts to feel like compromise. Outgrowing superficial connections is not an act of rejection, it is a consequence of growth. When your internal world expands, your external environment must eventually reflect that expansion. The difficulty is that relationships are often built on shared levels of awareness. When one person evolves and the other remains in the same patterns, the connection can no longer sustain the same depth. You may still care about those people, you may still value the history, but the resonance begins to fade. This creates a unique kind of tension. Part of you wants to hold on to maintain the familiarity, the comfort, the sense of connection. But another part of you recognizes that staying in those spaces requires you to suppress your truth. You may find yourself dimming your insights, avoiding deeper conversations, or pretending not to see what you clearly perceive. Over time, that internal conflict becomes exhausting, because when you are aware, you cannot unknow what you know. As a result, distance begins to form. Sometimes it's gradual, less frequent conversations, fewer shared experiences. Other times it's abrupt, a clear realization that you no longer align. This distance can feel like loss. There may be moments where you question yourself, wondering if you are becoming too distant, too different, too detached. But what you are actually experiencing is a recalibration of your standards. Awakened individuals begin to seek depth, authenticity, and truth in their interactions. Small talk loses its appeal unless it leads somewhere meaningful. You crave conversations that challenge you, that expand you, that reveal something real. You become more selective, not out of judgment, but out of alignment. Your energy is no longer available for connections that feel forced or empty. This is where solitude enters the picture. not as punishment, but as a natural phase of transition. When you outgrow old connections and have not yet aligned with new ones, there is a space in between. That space can feel isolating if you interpret it as absence. But in reality, it is an opening. It is a period where you are being asked to strengthen your relationship with yourself. During this phase, you begin to understand the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness comes from feeling disconnected and seeking external validation to fill that gap. Solitude, on the other hand, is a conscious state where you are alone but not empty. You start to appreciate your own thoughts, your own presence, your own rhythm. You realize that you do not need constant interaction to feel whole. There is also clarity that emerges in solitude. Without the noise of constant social interaction, you can hear your own inner voice more clearly. You can evaluate what you truly value, what you are willing to tolerate, and what you are no longer willing to accept. This clarity becomes the foundation for future connections. Because now, you are not seeking people out of habit or fear of being alone. You are aligning with individuals who match your level of awareness. It's important to recognize that this process is not about becoming disconnected from humanity. It is about becoming more intentional with your connections. You are no longer driven by the need to belong at any cost. Instead, you are guided by alignment, authenticity, and mutual growth. The number of connections may decrease, but the quality increases significantly. In this phase, patience becomes essential. Meaningful connections are not formed through force or urgency. They emerge naturally when you are fully grounded in who you are. And until those connections appear, the time you spend alone is not wasted is preparing you. It is refining your standards, strengthening your identity, and ensuring that when the right people enter your life, you meet them not from a place of need, but from a place of completeness. Most people are conditioned to measure their worth by how they are received. Approval becomes a currency. Validation becomes a source of identity. You're praised when you fit expectations, accepted when you conform, and questioned when you step outside the norm. Over time, this creates a subtle dependence or sense of self, begins to rely on how others respond to you. But true strength does not operate within that system. True strength begins the moment you recognize that your value is not something to be negotiated with the outside world. Self-sovereignty is the shift from external dependence to internal authority. It is the decision that your thoughts, your emotions, your values, and your direction are no longer dictated by the approval or rejection of others. This does not mean you become disconnected or indifferent. It means you are no longer controlled. There is a difference between considering feedback and being defined by it. A sovereign individual listens, observes, and evaluates, but ultimately chooses their path based on alignment, not applause. This kind of strength is not loud. It doesn't need to prove itself. In fact, it often appears quiet from the outside because it is grounded internally. When you are sovereign, you do not chase recognition because you are already rooted in your own sense of worth. You don't need constant reassurance because you trust your own judgment. You don't compromise your truth just to maintain connection because you understand that any connection built on self-betrayal will eventually collapse. The challenge is that stepping into self-sovereignty can feel uncomfortable at first. When you withdraw your need for validation, you may notice how much of your past behavior was shaped by it. The way you spoke, the way you acted, the way you presented yourself, it may have all been subtly influenced by the desire to be accepted. Becoming aware of this is not a setback, it is a breakthrough. Because once you see it, you have the power to change it. There is also a period where your independence may be misunderstood. People who are used to you seeking approval may feel confused when you stop. They may interpret your self-trust as distance or even arrogance. But this is not about distancing yourself from others, it is about returning to yourself. You are no longer negotiating your identity in every interaction. You are simply expressing it. Self-sovereignty requires responsibility. When you stop relying on others to guide your decisions, you also lose the ability to blame them for your outcomes. Every choice becomes yours. Every result becomes yours. That level of ownership can feel intense, but it is also where real power lies. Because if your life is truly yours, then it is also fully within your capacity to shape. Another aspect of this strength is emotional independence. It doesn't mean you stop caring or feeling, it means your emotional state is not constantly dictated by external circumstances. You are not easily destabilized by someone's opinion, mood, or behavior. You can experience connection without losing your center. You can care deeply without becoming dependent. This creates stability, and that stability becomes a foundation for everything else in your life. When you operate from self-sovereignty, your relationships also change. You no longer seek people to complete you or validate you. Instead, you connect from a place of wholeness. This shifts the dynamic entirely. There is less need, less pressure, and more authenticity. You are not performing for acceptance, you are simply being, and that allows others to do the same. This level of strength also sharpens your decision-making. Without the noise of external opinions dominating your thinking, you can access your intuition more clearly. You begin to trust your internal signals, what feels right, what feels misaligned, what resonates, and what doesn't. Decisions become less about pleasing others and more about honoring your direction. Over time, self-sovereignty becomes a way of life. It is reflected in how you speak, how you act, how you choose, and how you respond. It is not something you turn on and off, it is a state of being. And from that state, your strength is no longer conditional. It is not dependent on circumstances, people, or outcomes. It is rooted in something deeper, your unwavering commitment to remain true to yourself. When you can feel beyond words, boundaries stop being optional. They become essential for survival, clarity, and self-respect. An empath without boundaries is like an open channel, constantly receiving signals without any filter. You pick up on moods, tensions, unspoken conflicts, and emotional undercurrents. And if you are not intentional about protecting your space, you begin to carry what was never yours to begin with. Over time, this creates confusion because you can no longer distinguish between what you feel and what you have absorbed. Boundaries are not walls that isolate you from others. They are structures that define where you end and where others begin. They allow you to engage with people without losing your center. Without them, empathy turns into emotional overload. You may find yourself drained after interactions, overwhelmed in crowded environments, or emotionally affected by situations that have nothing to do with your own life. This is not because you are weak, it is because your sensitivity is operating without direction. One of the first realizations is that not every emotion you experience belongs to you. This awareness alone can be transformative. When you enter a room and suddenly feel anxious, heavy, or unsettled, it may not be your internal state, it may be something you are perceiving from the environment. Without boundaries, you unconsciously internalize it. With boundaries, you observe it without ownership. That distinction is what preserves your clarity. Establishing boundaries begins with self-awareness. You need to recognize what drains you, what energizes you, and what disrupts your emotional balance. This requires honesty. There may be people, environments, or patterns that consistently leave you feeling depleted, yet you tolerate them out of obligation, habit, or fear of disappointing others. Boundaries challenge that pattern. They require you to prioritize your well-being, even when it feels uncomfortable. This discomfort often comes from conditioning. Many people are taught that being available, accommodating, and self-sacrificing is a sign of kindness. But for an empath, constant availability can lead to burnout. Boundaries are not a rejection of others, they are a commitment to yourself. They allow you to give from a place of fullness rather than depletion. Because when you are drained, your ability to support others becomes limited and inconsistent. Communication plays a key role in maintaining boundaries. It is not enough to feel them internally, you must be willing to express them. This might mean saying no when something does not align with your energy. It might mean stepping away from conversations that feel heavy or unproductive. It might mean limiting how much emotional responsibility you take on in your relationships. These actions can feel challenging at first, especially if you are used to prioritizing others, but they are necessary for long-term balance. Another important aspect is energetic boundaries. Not everything requires a verbal response. Sometimes it is about how you hold your presence. You can listen without absorbing. You can care without caring. This is a shift in mindset. Instead of feeling responsible for fixing or resolving every emotional situation around you, you allow yourself to witness without attachment. You offer support when appropriate, but you do not take ownership of outcomes that are not yours to control. Boundaries also help you develop discernment. Not everyone is meant to have the same level of access to you. Some people can handle your depth, respect your energy, and reciprocate your presence. Others may not have that capacity. Boundaries help you recognize the difference and adjust accordingly. This is not about judging others, Sat. It's about understanding compatibility and protecting your emotional space. As you strengthen your boundaries, you will notice a shift in how you feel. There is less overwhelm, less confusion, and more stability. Your energy becomes more consistent because it is no longer being pulled in multiple directions. You become more present in your interactions because you are not subconsciously managing an overload of emotional input. Over time, boundaries become a natural extension of self-respect. They are not something you force, they are something you embody. And when you embody them, your relationships become clearer, your energy becomes stronger, and your ability to navigate the world as an empath becomes more sustainable and empowering. There is a moment in this journey where what once felt like loneliness begins to transform into something entirely different. At first, the absence of constant connection can feel unsettling. You may notice the silence more, the lack of familiar interactions, the space where people used to be. The mind often interprets this as something missing, something wrong. It searches for distraction, for noise, for anything to fill the gap. But if you stay present long enough, something begins to shift in that space. Loneliness is not just about being alone, it is about feeling disconnected from meaning. It is the sense that something essential is lacking, that your experience is incomplete without external presence. This feeling can drive you to seek connection even when it is not aligned, simply to avoid the discomfort of being by yourself. But when you begin to understand yourself more deeply, that pattern starts to change. You realize that not all connection is fulfilling and not all solitude is empty. Sacred solitude is a different state entirely. It is not imposed, it is chosen. It is a space where you are alone but not lacking. Instead of searching for something outside of you, your attention turns inward. You begin to engage with your own thoughts, your own emotions, your own presence in a way that is intentional rather than reactive. This is where self-mastery begins to take form. In solitude, there are no distractions to hide behind. You come face to face with yourself, your patterns, your habits, your fears, your desires. At first, this can be uncomfortable. Without external noise, the internal voice becomes clearer. But this clarity is necessary. It allows you to observe without interference. You begin to notice how you respond to situations, how you process emotions, how you make decisions. This awareness is the foundation of growth. As you spend more time in this state, you start to build a different kind of relationship with yourself. Instead of avoiding your own company, you begin to appreciate it. You find rhythm in your own presence. Your thoughts become more organized, your emotions more understood, your actions more intentional. You are no longer reacting to fill space, you are choosing how to use it. Purpose plays a crucial role in this transformation. When you are aligned with something meaningful, solitude no longer feels like isolation, it becomes focus. Your energy is directed toward creation, learning, or growth rather than seeking distraction. You are not waiting for something to happen. You are actively shaping your experience. This sense of direction gives your time alone structure and significance. There is also a sense of freedom that emerges. When you are comfortable in your own presence, you are no longer dependent on others to feel complete. You can engage in relationships from a place of choice rather than need. This changes the quality of your interactions. You are not seeking to be filled to or sharing from a place that is already full. That distinction removes pressure, both from yourself and from others. Sacred solitude also strengthens emotional stability. When you are constantly surrounded by external input, your emotional state can become reactive, influenced by everything around you. In solitude, you have the opportunity to regulate and stabilize your inner world. You learn how to sit with emotions without immediately trying to change or escape them. This builds resilience. You become less affected by fluctuations in your environment because your foundation is internal. Another important shift is the development of clarity. With fewer external influences, your thinking becomes more focused. You can evaluate your priorities, your values, and your direction without interference. Decisions become clearer because they are not clouded by the need to please or conform. You begin to act in alignment with what truly matters to you rather than what is expected of you. Over time, this state of solitude becomes something you value rather than something you avoid. It is where you recalibrate, where you reconnect, where you strengthen your sense of self. It becomes a space of renewal rather than absence. And from that space, you carry a different energy into the world, one that is grounded, intentional, and self-sustained. There comes a stage where your journey stops being about how many people are in your life and starts being about the quality of energy you bring into every interaction. When emotional depth matures, it no longer seeks constant affirmation through connection. Instead, it refines itself into presence. And presence, when it is grounded, aware, and intentional, has far more impact than a wide circle of shallow relationships. Most people are conditioned to equate social success with numbers, more friends, more followers, more validation. But an awakened empath begins to see through this illusion. You realize that being surrounded by people does not guarantee understanding, and constant interaction does not guarantee connection. What truly matters is resonance, the ability to meet another person in a space of authenticity where both individuals are fully present. This is where your role shifts. You are no longer trying to fit into every environment or be accepted by every group. Instead, you become selective, not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. You recognize that your energy influences others, and not everyone is ready for the level of depth you bring. This awareness changes how you show up. You are not there to entertain or to please, you are there to be real. Being a powerful presence means that when you engage with someone, you are fully there. You listen beyond words. You respond with intention. You create a space where others feel seen, not because you are trying to impress them, but because your awareness naturally extends to them. This kind of interaction leaves an impact that surface-level communication never can. People may not always understand it, but they feel it. At the same time, this presence requires stability within yourself. If your sense of identity is still dependent on how others respond, your presence will fluctuate. Some interactions will elevate you, others will diminish you. When you are grounded in who you are, your presence remains consistent. You do not lose yourself in the energy of others. You engage without being absorbed. This is where influence begins to develop. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that naturally commands it. When you are aligned internally, people sense it. There is a coherence in how you think, feel, and act. Your words carry weight because they are not just spoken, they are embodied. This alignment creates trust, even without effort. People are drawn to authenticity because it is rare. Another aspect of this shift is that you begin to value depth over frequency. You may have fewer interactions, but each one carries more meaning. A single conversation can be more fulfilling than hours of superficial exchange. This is not about withdrawing from the world, it is about engaging with it differently. You are not chasing interaction for the sake of it, you are creating connection where it truly exists. As you continue to develop this presence, you also become more aware of the effect you have on others. Your energy can calm, inspire, or even challenge those around you. This is not something you force, it is a natural extension of your awareness. When you are centered, you create a space where others can access a deeper part of themselves. Some will welcome that, others may resist it, but either way, your presence initiates something beyond the surface. There is also a level of responsibility that comes with this. Being a powerful presence means being intentional with how you show up. It means recognizing that your words and actions carry influence, even in subtle ways. You are not just participating in interactions, you are shaping them. This requires integrity. It requires that you remain aligned with your values, even when it would be easier not to. Over time, you begin to see that your role is not to accumulate connections, but to elevate the quality of every space you enter. Whether it is a brief interaction or a long-term relationship, your presence leaves something behind: clarity, awareness, or a shift in perspective. And in that way, your impact is not measured by how many people you know, but by how deeply you connect with those you encounter. Thank you for sharing this space, and energy may your path continue to deepen with clarity and strength. Goodbye for now, and may you walk forward grounded in your truth and inner power.